Okay, let's unpack this. The conservative wing of America's Catholic bishops has, well, decisively secured control of the U.S. conference. It really signals a commitment to specific moral priorities and a pretty clear path of political continuity.
That really is the core mission for this deep dive, isn't it? We're exploring these recent elections at the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, the USCCB, and asking, how exactly did the hierarchy choose this leadership path? The sources keep describing it as very focused on social wedge issues.
Right, and we need to look at what this means right now, the immediate implications for their relationship, which is powerful with the Trump administration.
And maybe even more significantly, why these choices seem to be creating, well, a palpable theological friction with the Holy See, with the Vatican.
So let's get to the news hook here, the key data points setting the stage for the next 3 years. The USCCB's presidential election, this was just held for 2025. It resulted in a victory, narrow but definitive, for Archbishop Paul Coakley of Oklahoma City.
Yeah, he won the runoff against Bishop Daniel Flores of Brownsville, Texas. The vote count was 128 to 109.
128-109. That margin, it's critical, like you said. It tells us the conference is definitely split.
Deeply split, yes. But that majority, even by just 19 votes, they opted for Coakley. And that confirms the strong preference for, let's say, continuity in how they engage politically and what their social agenda looks like.
And continuity really seems to be the key word here, right? I mean, this isn't some sudden shift.
Not at all. Coakley follows Archbishop Timothy Broglio, who was elected back in 2022, and he was also known for his focus on these key moral issues.
So the sources are suggesting this back-to-back selection, it really signals a powerful desire within the U.S. hierarchy to just maintain a clear, consistent path. It kind of cements a specific, conservative political alignment.
It's definitely an institutional signal. It feels like the bishops were saying, yes, we want leaders who prioritize that specific focus. They seem content with the direction they've been heading.
Which means doubling down on priorities they've already established.
Exactly. Doubling down.
So, okay, when we talk about this continuity, this mandate,
Right.
what does that actually look like on the domestic policy front? What are the real policy consequences of picking leaders who have this intense focus on social wedge issues?
Well, it looks like an intensification of a strategy we already know. I mean, sure, most U.S. bishops are reliably conservative on core doctrine. That's not new.
Right.
But choosing Coakley and Broglio before him, it emphasizes an intensified focus, particularly on two areas: that unwavering opposition to abortion and opposing the advancement of LGBTQ plus rights.
And that focus on abortion, that's been clearly laid out before. Under Archbishop Jose Gomez, the former leader, the conference insisted abortion was the, quote, preeminent issue in Catholic teaching.
Preeminent. Coakley's election just reinforces this. But the consequence, as you mentioned, is that this kind of laser focus can really lock the U.S. bishops into alignment with very specific partisan interests.
And does that partisan interest then translate directly into a political stance, what the source is saying?
The sources are calling it a posture of accommodation with the Trump administration. That's the phrase they use. Since Coakley's term covers President Trump's second term, this accommodation suggests the USCCB as a body probably isn't going to be leading the charge in challenging White House actions or offering, bold critiques.
Okay, that raises a really critical point about leverage, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And consequence. Why would the USCCB accommodate the administration so fully? What's the trade-off there?
Well, the likely trade-off is access. They potentially gain a sympathetic ear on their number one issue, their preeminent issue, securing favorable judicial appointments, supporting legislative efforts to restrict abortion access, things like that.
But the cost?
The cost could be significant. They risk losing some of that moral authority to critique the administration on broader social justice issues,
And the sources actually give a really compelling specific detail here, tying Coakley directly to that political and even economic alignment. He's the ecclesiastical advisor to the Napa Institute.
Yes, that affiliation is really significant, and you can't ignore the conflict it presents. The Napa Institute, for listeners who don't know, is a conservative organization. It's known for promoting laissez-faire economics.
Which means minimal government intervention.
Exactly. And it's also known for being strongly supportive of the Trump administration.
Hold on, isn't laissez-faire economics pretty fundamentally at odds with a lot of core Catholic social teaching? Things like the preferential option for the poor, the idea that government sometimes needs to intervene to address huge income inequality. How does that square?
Well, that's precisely the internal tension, isn't it? The influence of an institute like Napa suggests a potential shift. It might mean prioritizing certain moral issues, the ones we've mentioned, over others.
meaning the conference might become less vocal about things like poverty or environmental issues or those widening income gaps.
Potentially, yes. And we see this alignment elsewhere, too. You have Bishop Robert Barron, Bishop Kevin Rhodes, also seen as conservative leaders serving on President Trump's Religious Liberty Commission. It paints a pretty clear picture of alignment, even on the regulatory front.
Okay, but there seems to be one major exception to this pattern of accommodation. One unified issue where the bishops, like across the board, remain absolutely committed.
That's right, standing with migrants and advocating for humane immigration policies.
It's actually remarkable how united they seem on this, despite all the other deep political divisions we're talking about.
It really is. They even sent a letter recently to Pope Leo XIV affirming this commitment. They defended the right of migrants to worship free from intimidation. And this isn't just talk, it's about pushing for comprehensive immigration reform.
And it's important to emphasize, this commitment comes even from the conservative leaders, right? Bishop Rhodes, who you mentioned is on Trump's commission, still insists on the right of detained migrants to get pastoral care to receive the sacraments.
Absolutely. They frame it as a basic issue of human dignity, but also, interestingly, as a defense of religious liberty, arguing that being detained doesn't strip someone of their right to worship.
So that strong, unified stand on migrants, it feels like the exception that almost proves the rule.
I think that's a good way to put it, because the general tendency, that political accommodation we discussed, it seems to act like a kind of self-imposed constraint on broader critique.
And this accommodation, it immediately puts the U.S. hierarchy, well, at odds with the Vatican, doesn't it? Which brings us to the core complication here. This serious theological and pastoral distance from Rome, from the Holy See.
Yeah, this is where the story gets even deeper. This conservative path the USCCB majority has chosen, it's resulted in ongoing theological friction. And that includes the relationship with the late Pope Francis, and now with his successor, Pope Leo XIV.
It's fascinating because the U.S. hierarchy, or at least a significant part of it, has been wrestling with Rome's more inclusive, sort of modernizing approach, the vision Pope Francis really pushed for years now.
That's right. And the U.S. bishop's choice for president now, Coakley, it's certainly not seen as any kind of de-escalating step in that tension. If anything, it implies a kind of quiet but still obvious resistance to the path of dialogue and social justice that Pope Leo XIV is championing.
And sometimes the resistance isn't so quiet. I mean, there's specific, concrete evidence of pretty open dissent. Going back to 2018, Coakley publicly supported Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano.
Vigano, yes. An extremely ardent critic who actually called for Pope Francis to resign and made all sorts of politically charged allegations against him.
Coakley's support back then, it was a huge symbolic act, wasn't it? It wasn't just disagreeing. It was siding with someone actively trying to, well, undermine the sitting pope.
Absolutely profound. Coakley publicly stated he had the deepest respect for Archbishop Vigano and his personal integrity. Now, this was deeply alarming to many church leaders globally, and we should remember Vigano was later formally declared excommunicate.
Maybe we should pause on that term for our listeners. What does it mean, excommunicate? And what was the real gravity of Coakley supporting him, even before that happened?
Excommunication is the most serious penalty the church has. It means being formally cut off from the sacraments, from membership in the church. It signals a complete irreconcilable break. So, Coakley supporting Vigano, even before the final decree, it symbolized the willingness of some U.S. bishops to put their political priorities and their opposition to Pope Francis's direction above, frankly, obedience to the universal church structure.
It really made the U.S. hierarchy stand out in its level of institutional opposition.
It really did. Unique in many ways.
So if we connect this back to policy, you see this clear philosophical disconnect emerging. The U.S. bishop's conservative focus, this preeminent priority on criminalizing abortion, it often means other critical threats to human dignity get treated as secondary. Issues like anti-racism, economic justice, healthcare access.
Which brings up that fundamental question. What does it mean to be truly and holistically pro-life? The sources point out Pope Leo XIV himself has directly challenged this narrow view. He said, and this is a direct quote essentially, someone who is against abortion but in favor of the death penalty is not really pro-life.
Wow.
Yeah. It underscores the Vatican's push for a comprehensive view of Catholic moral tradition, one that tackles poverty and social marginalization with the same energy it tackles issues of individual morality.
So looking at the synthesis here, putting all our sources together, the current institutional direction of the USCCB, driven by that narrow Coakley majority, It's clearly prioritizing continuity on specific social issues and political alignment, even if that means sacrificing alignment with the Vatican's modernizing agenda.
Exactly. And this focused alignment, this sort of self-imposed limit on critique, it probably means the U.S. bishops are unlikely to strongly challenge the administration on, say, economic policies that might cut programs for the poor, or to confront worsening income inequality, especially given the influence of groups like the Napa Institute on the new leadership.
Which really highlights that deep internal division again, that 128-109 vote.
Yeah.
The runner-up, Bishop Daniel Flores, he was seen by many as someone who could have maybe unified the conference more, helped align it better with the Vatican's pastoral priorities, especially Pope Leo's push for synodality and dialogue.
Right, synodality, just for the listener, that's the Pope's big initiative for a more collaborative listening church. It involves dialogue with lay people, clergy, everyone globally. Flores really represented that approach more.
So the fact that Flores was then elected vice president, what do we make of that?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? It maybe offers a small glimmer of hope. It suggests the U.S. conference might eventually, cautiously, open itself up a bit more to the church's sort of new horizons.
But the reality for now, certainly for the majority of the current administration's term, is that the U.S. bishop's institutional direction seems firmly set on continuity and accommodation, even if it means keeping this profound distance from Rome.
Yeah, which means the U.S. church institutionally will likely serve as a pretty powerful policy advocate for the conservative political movement over the next few years, focusing intensely on those chosen core priorities.
So what does this all mean for you as you watch institutional Catholicism in America?
It means, I think, that a significant politically powerful religious body seems to have made a choice, trading perhaps broader moral influence for specific policy access on key issues. They've secured a majority leadership that prioritizes continuity on certain moral fronts over philosophical alignment with the Holy See.
Okay, let's end with a final provocative thought for you to consider. Given these deep internal divisions we've discussed, and the conservative leadership's clear preference for political accommodation, how much actual leverage can the USCCB really exert on the White House when it comes to the one issue where they are truly unified humane immigration policy?
That's the question, isn't it? If they're reluctant to offer bold critique on almost everything else, does their silence elsewhere diminish their power to speak out effectively, even on the issues they truly care most deeply about, like migration? Something to think about.